My name is Zen-Yie Tsai, and I'm a spoken word artist, and you're watching channelAPA.com. I'm a spoken word artist. I'm based here in Brooklyn, but I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I went to school at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and I majored in comparative literature and urban planning, which obviously has prepared me for a career as a spoken word artist. But I started off doing spoken word when I was in high school because I had a high school English teacher. He used to sneak me and a couple of my friends into the bars in Chicago to watch the original poetry slams go down, and so I've been writing and performing ever since then. Well, for those of you who have not seen what spoken word is, it's a kind of oral poetry. For a lot of people, it's really connected to hip-hop. For some people, it's not connected to hip-hop at all. For some people, it's very connected to folk music or punk music or cultural nationalism or, so that's what I love about spoken word, because you have people from all different kinds of backgrounds who are involved in writing and performing poems. But basically, it's, usually tends to be short poems, maybe about 3 minutes or less, that are performed for an audience with the desire to really connect and move people. That depends on, each poem's just really different, like some poems come pretty quickly, like I think some of my poems are pretty close to the first draft, and sometimes it is kind of that that mystical inspiration thing that people talk about and you kind of don't really believe, happens. Like sometimes, the poem just comes to you and you just let it out. I mean, other pieces of mine I've worked and drafted on for years and years. What was interesting is Black, White, Whatever, which is a piece of mine that's on YouTube that, a lot of people really like, is that I started Black, White, Whatever probably a year or maybe even a year and a half before I actually finished it. And it wasn't really because it was like, oh, I need to, craft these words right, but it's like, it was kind of like I had the first part of the idea for the poem, but I didn't feel like it was totally complete until everything that was happening with the presidential election and all the rhetoric that was going on around race and culture and, and media, that poem finally found the other half of it that I was looking for to express, like, okay, why does this matter? Why does this phrase, black, white, whatever, drive me crazy so much? So it really depends on the poem. Some are very fast and some just need a little bit more time for the other half of the poem to come along. Well, I always say that a piece is never really finished for me until I've performed it in front of an audience at least a couple of times. So usually when I first write a piece, I'll perform it a couple of times off the page with an audience, and then I get a sense for how to edit it through just the feeling of having the words in my mouth, having the feeling of of how it connects or doesn't connect with an audience, like something about the live energy, and testing it out with different crowds really teaches me about what the poem is. So actually performance is a big part of my writing process. And then in terms of rehearsing, I mean, I think that it usually takes like a couple of months of continuously doing the poem out and about, because I think that for me, spoken word is kind of similar to stand-up in that way, that it's very hard to just rehearse without an audience. You really need to feel the energy, the liveness of it. Well, some of my other poems, well, I just put out an album in December called Further She Wrote, and so there's 11 poems on there that were all written from between 2007 and 2010. And some of the poems on there include this piece called Real Women I Know, which I wrote originally for Feminist Anthology, because the Feminist Anthology, they asked me to, just write what I wanted to communicate to the next generation of feminists. And I was like, well, I think a lot of times, and I think this is true of activists too, that sometimes the activists and feminists can be very judgmental and very and not embracing of all the people that we hope to really, not as embracing of the people that we really hope to be advocating for as we could be. So that piece is a little bit about that. I've written, this album also has some pieces about living in Brooklyn and some of the, cultural politics, related to that. I write a lot about, gender and immigration, Asian American identity. So that's kind of the general range of the work that I do. Further She Wrote was, I'm like, well, everyone should get it. But it was a really great process, for me to sit down with the producer, Black Cracker, who worked on my last album, because it was really an evolution of where he's at and where I'm at. And and just really thinking about how can we get deeper inside of the poetry, and really how can we get deeper inside of the music, and how to really tell a cohesive story that gives you something that, you know, there's something so magical about the performance when you're connecting with someone live, and we want to communicate that as much as possible on an album and put in a lot of other layers to it. So I think that this album is really exciting in that it is that marriage between spoken word and music, and also that I think it deals with a lot of the ambiguities and complexities and questions that I've been really asking myself, like, well, I thought I was all about this, but maybe, you know, life is a little bit different than I thought it was. So it's an interesting journey in that way. So I hope people enjoy it. Thank you. I really appreciate people who support Asian American independent artists, organizations like channelAPA that's really trying to, you know, broadcast Asian America as much as possible. I really appreciate people who support spoken word, because I think for some people who are into spoken word, it's like, yeah, the whole world knows about spoken word. But for most people, it's a very fringy, like weird, like, what is this that you're doing? You know, like you're not really doing a speech. It's not really stand up. It's not like an MC. It's not like singing, but it's something, you know, so people don't even know how to respond or recognize it. So I really, really appreciate people who throughout the years have been really supportive of my work and really giving of their love and appreciation. It means a lot to me. Yeah, if anyone wants to find out more about me and my work, they can check out my website. It's www.yellowgirl.com. So that's YELLOWGURL.com. So just Yellow Girl with a U. And I'm on Facebook and MySpace and Twitter. My YouTube channel is KZTSAI. So yeah, and of course my Bandcamp website. But you can get all that on my main website.